Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today is the day of reckoning. Today is the day we've all been waiting for. It doesn't matter whether you're a red boy or a blue boy, today is the day that we've all been waiting to hear. Is it really as good as we've been led to believe? Well, hopefully I'm going to be able to help you. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm not going to mess around with too much other than 1800X, because that's the processors that we've been sent first. We will be getting the 1700X and the 1700. I think they're going to be trickling them out a week apart. So reviews are going to be staggered, but we've got the big boy first. The 1800X, it's 8 cores. It's got hyper threading, so it's got 16 threads. Basically what that means is your system will see effectively 16 cores, because you can put 2 instructions into each core at a time. It's very similar to the way Intel do it. So 8 cores, 16 thread. Base clock is 3.6 gigahertz. It then boosts to 4 gigahertz, although that is something we will be covering in depth on this as well. The X has also got XFR, so it does mean it can go a little bit further if it can. Temperature dependent and system dependent. Again, this is something I will be covering, but I don't want to go into too much detail other than that, because all the scientific mumbo jumbo is not really something that we have time for, and let's face it, if I really went into it, this video would be 2 hours long. So if you want to know all the scientific stuff about the cores and the layouts and literally all the silicon stuff that's going on, then you can go and have a look at the written review on the OC3D website, or you can go and watch another video from someone else on YouTube. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to keep it like chatting to your mate at the pub, because that's the way I prefer to do things. So we will be getting a little bit nitty gritty. I do need to show you the system running, because I do need to explain to you about the way it boosts. I do need to explain to you about the difference between single thread and then multi-thread applications, because the CPU does act differently to them as well. I also do need to talk to you about temperatures, and there's some weird stuff going on with temperatures, but we do need to get all in with that. Then there is a plethora of tests, because I've secretly been testing old AMD stuff in the background for the last couple of weeks. And the reason why I've done that is they've not really released anything for a while. We've since switched to Windows 10. We've updated the games on our CPU test rig. So there was a lot of stuff where there would have been massive, great gaping holes of tests. So we went back and we dug the 8320 out and retested that. We dug the FX6350 out. We retested that. We dug an FM2 rig out and we retested a quad-core Athlon. And the reason why we did this, because you're thinking, we don't want to know about old results. Yeah, you do, because this is the first big, massive release from AMD for such a long time. It's a really good point to be able to, rather than my graphs, because let's face it, there's not been many launches and everything would have been Intel, we've now got AMD results in there as well, up to date with the current suite, with all the latest benchmarks, so 3D Mark Firestrike Ultra, the VR benchmarks. We've since started running Geekbench and RealBench and all those ones, so we've now got those results in as well. So we can not only say where it is in comparison to Intel, but we can actually say it in comparison to where they came from and where they were before. So how far have AMD come from their own stuff? This is another really, really big talking point that we have spent so many days going over this secretly in the background to try and give us more to talk about, rather than everything that AMD's been talking about, which is 6900K, 6900K, 6900K. Why not talk about their own 8 cores to see how far they've come from them? So we've done a lot of digging, we've done a lot of stuff going on in the background. So next thing we really need to talk about is the AM4 socket, because that's new as well, and that's brilliant. Okay, so a slightly weird way to go about it, but a lot has changed with the socket and the chipset as well. So this is the Crosshair 6 Hero. This is AM4, this is the new motherboard. This is the Crosshair 5 Formula Z. This is the old one. This is the one it replaces. It has been replaced. You know what I mean. So I thought this was just a really good way to point out the instant changes. really good and main point is AM4 is a different size socket. So the mounts here for the CPU are actually wider than the AM3 ones here. So this one would have been AM3, AM3 plus, FM2, FM2 plus. So basically everything the old ones, and these are slightly narrower mounts than these ones. So there's two very clear things that we do need to say is you either need to get a different CPU cooler to the one that you've got at the moment, or if you've got like an AIO or something, a lot of manufacturers will be doing upgrade kits unless that you have one of the coolers that latches onto these parts. Because if your cooler latches onto these, then it will fit and it will mount fine anyway. If your CPU cooler, you have to take these black parts off and bolt it through the board, then you're going to need a new one. Unless you buy the Crosshair 6 Hero, because you can take these off and it's got the screw mounts for the AM4 and the AM3 actually on there. It works with both. None of the other motherboards that are available on the market at the moment come with both of those. So that's something that I've had loads of questions on the preview videos that I've done online, asking me whether it supports AM3 and stuff, so with the other brands, and none of them do at the moment. So with the other thing to think about as well is it's now DDR4, so we've upgraded, so you're going to need new memory. This is DDR3, it isn't compatible, you can't go between the two. Other upgrades that we have got on here now is we do have M.2 support. And the M.2 support, you didn't have it on this, but it does use 4 PCI Express lanes, and it's PCI Express 3. A lot of people have also been asking about this slot here. Now, this one is wired as an 8 times, but it's technically a 16 times slot, but this is PCI Express 2 bandwidth. So are the rest of these ones here. This, and this come from the chipset itself. CPU wise, 16 PCI Express 3 lanes. It's the first time we've had it on an AMD board, because on this it's PCI Express 2. This we've now got PCI Express 3. One graphics card, 16 PCI Express lanes. 2 graphics cards, they share the 16 lanes and you get 8 in each. So if you wanted to go crossfire, then you would have 8 in the top and 8 in the bottom. If you just had one big beefy graphics card, then it would get the full fat 16. Another question that I've got is if you have a graphics card in here and you run an M.2 down here, do you lose lanes off of this? No, you don't. If you've got a graphics card in here, or even 2 graphics cards, then you can still run your M.2 at full bandwidth. If you wanted to run an PCI Express solid state drive in down here, the thing to remember is that this is PCI Express 2 bandwidth and not PCI Express 4. So a few bits and bobs for you to kind of pimp out there. Other differences between the two, in all honesty, it comes down to we've got a much more modern look across the board with all brands. RGB is obviously a thing. If you don't like that, it's easy. With all brands, you can turn them off. The one thing that I would say is the difference between the boards and the prices is going to be the stuff that you get on the actual boards themselves and the layout. So always take a note. Think about how many USBs you need on the back. Like here, for example, you can see this one has got loads. To be honest with you, if you need that many USB ports, I would be personally saying to you, why don't you just get a USB hub and put it underneath your desk and tidy your cables up? But the options are there. What we've also got as well that you can see is we've got a USB 3.1 C type port here. You've also got an A type port as well. So you've got more connectivity. That also goes with an internal USB 3.1 header here, which is for cases when they do finally catch up. You do get USB 3 down at the bottom as well. You do get USB 2 on board, although a lot of the boards now are starting to come out with less internal USB 2s. If you've got an AIO that needs a hookup for that, you might want another hookup for your power supply. You might want another hookup for like pump control or something like that. Then if you want to do that, you can get internal hubs now, because we do seem to be needing more internal USB 2s rather than less. you can get internal hubs. So if you find a board that you like and it's not got enough, maybe give that a thought. So there's just some bulletproof ways that I can kind of like talk you through where we've been and where we've come to. This board as well, for example, has got a dedicated water cooling area down here to not only monitor your pump speed, but also flow rates. You've also got dedicated water pump and AIO pump headers on the board. So there's, the other thing is also the quality of the audio is orders of magnitude better than what it was. But again, if you have a sniff around, that's not just specific Acer stuff. A lot of the other brands do have it as well. So I'm not just showing you this because it's Asus, it's more the fact that I've just got the 5 and the 6 here. And if I'm honest, I've actually got the Crosshair 1, the Crosshair 2, the Crosshair 3, the Crosshair 4, that is the 5, and then that is the 6. So I've got all 6 crosshairs. So when people tell you I'm an Intel fanboy or I'm paid off, you can tell them to go and politely swing themselves around with a rope, because I am a technology fanboy. Okay then, so our first quick look at the test rig. It is an Asus Prime Pro X370 or Asus Prime X370 Pro. You're probably going to wonder straight away why I've not used the Crosshair 6, because it is here. Well, at the end of the day, what I want to do is I want to be able to test the CPUs, because I'm going to get the 1800X, which we've got here today, the 1700X and the 1700, and I want to review them all on the same platform. And if you go back and you look at my old Intel reviews, just for donkey shonks, I've always used like the Z170A, the Z270A, X99A, X99A2. Going a long way back, I've always used what would now be called a prime board. So we're going to stay with it with this one, and then what that does mean is when I do go and review the Crosshair, if it is any good, it should be better than this. Rather than me doing the CPU review on the Crosshair and just trying to tell you that it's amazing and worth 250 quid out the box, I don't think I would be able to say that absolutely straight away. I think there would need to be some grounds to it and me to actually be able to substantiate my claims. So I've actually gone against advice from AMD. Well, AMD specifically asked me to use the Crosshair and I told them no, and I said I was going to use this one. Might seem a bit backwards to you, but it's just the way that I've always done my reviews. It also does mean that after reviewing the 1800X, if I go to the Crosshair and I can overclock it a bit more, or the memory is a bit higher, it then gives me something to say to you, well, at that price point you get this, but at the more expensive price point you get that. So I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. It's up to totally everybody else if they want to do it, but we've gone for that. We've also got in here where this is 2666 memory and it's Corsair LPX, but I've also got 2800, 3000, 3000, 3200. I've got a whole selection of memory speeds, Crucial, Kingston. I've got G-Skill. So there's a lot of brands that I've been through and used some of these as well, so I can talk to you a lot about that in a minute. M.2, we're using the Corsair MP500 on this one. Cooling is the H110i GT, and as you can see, as I said to you before, even though this is an AM4 only mount, because the H110i GT actually mounts onto the plastic brackets that come on the motherboard. This one we used to test the Crosshair 5 from before with the AM3s. We just swapped the motherboard out, bosh, we can clip it in. It's only the ones that actually screw into the motherboard that you wouldn't be able to use on going forward. So that's another kind of very visual way to show you that we've used an older cooler on the newer platform and how you can do it. Beyond that point, the only other thing to talk about, and it will come up in a little bit as well when we talk about cooling, is the fact that we're using ML fans. So we've got 140mm ML fans in the roof, and all the other ones are 120s. But that's not really going to matter. It's the actual fans for the cooler that you're going to want to know about more than anything else. And when we did the power test as well, we have a HX1000i in the back, and we monitor the power via link. Okay. So Asus BIOS. Now, some of the things are going to be different across the range, but a lot of the bits when we go into the next bit, you'll see are different. This is the basic easy mode area where you can set up fan speeds and fan speed profiles. The only thing that we can really talk about here is this DOCP, and this is basically XMP on all of the other boards. It means the same sort of thing, but we'll cover it in more depth in a minute. Something that you can see, I've told you about the cooler that we're running, is you can see that we've got a motherboard temperature of 22, 23 degrees, nice. Temperature in the room at the moment is probably about 18 degrees. CPU temperature, but not in the operating system or anything like that, you can see here is 54 degrees. Again, we will talk to you about that a little bit more in a minute. You can also see up here it says Ryzen 1800X 8 core. Another very visual thing that you can see is that the fact that we're running the Prime X370 Pro and that we're on the 0504 BIOS. This is a public BIOS, it's not a specially tweaked one or anything like that. This should be on the website on the 2nd, I'm told. Right, so there we go. Other thing that we can see here just quickly is the VDD CR CPU voltage, that's your CPU voltage. You can see that flicking around the 1.4 volt mark. Now, Intel fanboys are instantly going to go in at that and be on about, oh, the voltage is really high, man. And they'll all be a bit like that, sitting out the back of their camper vans and stuff. You need to stop comparing the two in this respect. They do the same kind of job, but they do it in different kind of ways. So that is our voltage at the moment. Let's just move on and start dealing with it. Anyway, looking at my swangly Claymore, I'm just going to hit F7. And then when we go to F7, it takes us into the advanced mode. This gives us a little bit more, of a spaced out information that we were talking about before. But the most important thing is when we flick on to AI Tweaker, and this is where things are slightly different. So AI Overclock Tuner, normally you'd be able to open that and you'd have auto, you would have XMP, and you would have manual. Now in this one we don't get any manual, you've just got auto and DOCP, which is your XMP, and when you enable that, it enables stuff in exactly the same way that you would have expected with XMP before. Now in some of the other boards you might have a slightly different way, and I'm just focusing on this because this is the one right in front of me. The other things, the reason why we're here is so we can talk about things like custom core ratio and then CPU core ratio. So if you keep an eye on the target CPU speed, if I was to go to 40, that then changes to 4000 megahertz. 40 times 100, really simple, really sort of simple way to stuff that we've looked at before. If I go back to auto, we go to 3.6, but this is where it gets slightly confusing. So if we go into manual, which was really what was missing from the AI Overclock Tuner at the top, if we go into manual, it actually brings up the FID and the DID. Now these do mean some very different things because it's kind of like, so if I put 200 in here, then straight away up here we can see the CPU speed has gone to 5000, but this works like a divider stroke multiplier. So if I hit up, the first option we get is 8, so it's 5000. If I hit up again, 9, you can see it's dropped to 44444, and then you can see 10, we're now down to 4 gigahertz. So 200 FID, 10 DID, that gives us a way to get to 4 gigahertz. Now this isn't the base clock. It's just I've not really been able to get an exact kind of word out of AMD how this works. They've got some stuff in their overclocking guides and stuff, but it doesn't really say what they particularly are in any great depth. And by great depth, I mean kind of idiot-proof ways that I can understand. But just to give you a kind of idea, if we were to put this up to 250, not 250, I'm hitting too many keys at once, 250, there we go. We can see 250, 10 is now back to 5 gigahertz again. But if we were to go down to this, we can start turning the multiplier up, again, it will drop. So you can try different ways to get to the same kind of clock. Rather than it being, for argument's sake, 40, then you can get it this way. But the other thing, just to make things really, really confusing, is if we were to go 4 gigahertz here, and then we got 40. Now the little hint here is 40.004 gigahertz. You can do it in quarter increments as well. It's not fixed at all. So you can do 40.25 and then 40.25 at the top. And you can see it changing as we work our way up. So rather than one multiplier notch and then another multiplier notch, you can actually do a quarter multiplier notch as well. So you can actually ever so slightly inch your overclock up. So I'm going to stick this back on auto. There we go. So we're on auto, we've just got, and we're at 3.6 gigahertz. When we move down, normally you would see, or I'm used to seeing, a lot more options below this, but we then go straight into DRAM timing control, which has already been set up for us by the DOCP. DigiVRM, this is where your load line calibration is, and you've got your T probe and your power phase control, stuff like that. And then the VDDR CR CPU voltage, that is your basically your V core that you can set up if you want. And then you've got some other voltages down here, but there's, in all honesty, there's not a great deal that we've got to tweak with in terms of frequencies. So it's quite simple in that respect. The other thing that we can just talk about just quickly is the memory speeds, and that is your memory speed options. Now obviously it starts really, really low. 1333 megahertz. That's, well, that could have been DDR2 sort of speeds. So really for DDR4, I would say you're looking at 29, 33, 24, 26, 29 and 32. I will talk to you in more depth about actual memory speeds and stuff at the moment, but this board at this present moment in time, I've not been able to get above 2666. The Crosshair 6, I've heard from some of my system integrator friends that they are managing to be able to get 2933, but you can see the absolute bottom on this is 3200 megahertz. Now this could be a board thing. I'm going to guess that the 2666, the fact that I can't get above this at the moment, is an early BIOS problem, you know, with the board itself. I don't think it's a CPU problem at all. I do think it could be something to do with the fact that the Crosshair is such a high-end board. There's £100 between the prices. This one is £150. The Crosshair is £250. So there's a huge difference just to be able to go up to 2933. It was another reason why I chose more of a cost-effective board to talk to you about at the start, because it's going to be, I would assume, the sort of thing that's going to be the price range that most of you are going to want to buy. The other thing that we need to think about is a lot of people are going to go, oh, my mate with such and such is running 3200 megahertz or 3600 megahertz. Again, totally different platforms going about things in totally different ways. We just need to focus on what Ryzen can do at the moment, because at this present moment in time, if we were to try comparing to some of the other stuff, the only real one that we can compare with would have been the Crosshair 5, which was DDR3. And 2666 is way above what that could have done. So I think that's the best way to look at it. We will look at memory speeds and performance and stuff like that and the BIOS in a minute. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. We're going to go back to auto, and I'm going to clear the BIOS, load optimize defaults, and then we're just going to boot and go to the desktop. Okay, so yes, I am filming the screen, but it's so that you can watch me doing things live. So I've got OCCT up here, which I'm just going to flick on, and this can build up as we are talking. So AMD Ryzen Master at the bottom. This is their new kind of, they call it an overclocking tool, but when we talk about overclocking later on, I did it all manually in the BIOS. Manually, same thing. So I did it in the BIOS, but this is the best way at this present moment in time to monitor temperatures. So these are our temperatures just over here, and just if you hadn't noticed it before, we'll just go back to the desktop ever so quickly, well, back to stock ever so quickly, and we can close this off, and you can see that 53, you can see the temperatures coming down, 52, 50, there we go, 49. So you can see us working the temperatures back down again. Now this is the only way that we can monitor our temperatures at the moment, and there's no way for us to be able to have a look at a minimum, a maximum and an absolute value like you can with things like hardware monitor. AMD has always been funny with temperatures, and when we used to get temperatures with like hardware monitor and stuff in the background, I always used to think of it as a bit like a delta speed, as in like the the temperature above the ambient room temperature, because you'd never be able to have a 20 degrees room and your CPU running at 8 or 12 degrees at idle, despite what people may have thought. But anyway, so we're back here. What we can have a look is up here, just at the moment, you can see that the voltages are going anything from 0.392 up to 1.482. This is totally stock and dancing around because of things like power saving and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to bang this on, and this is basically going to load up all 8 cores. And we can see our temperatures, we're around the kind of 48, 49 mark, and it will work its way up. And then this will let us know what we're going to be able to get. So I'm going to just clear the min-max averages on the hardware monitor, just quick, and it doesn't really take long. Once this jumps up, there we go. So we're using 90% memory and we're 100% CPU power. Now, what you may have seen, if you've been paying attention, was just down here, the CPU speed actually dropped a bit, because if you have a look here, just here, this is our current value. This is 3543 at the moment. Our minimum value is 3518, but our maximum value is 3693. Now 3.7 is what it should be at stock, and then it should turbo up to 4 gigahertz, but where we're loading all 8 cores, it doesn't. Now this did make me think that maybe I'm being a bit unfair, because OCCT is really stressful. So why don't we just have a look at Cinebench then? Because, you know, AMD have been shouting about Cinebench loads. Okay, so Cinebench. Now annoyingly, this has already just flashed up to 4092. I was trying to get to the filming so I could show you it before it did do that. So Cinebench, what we're going to do is we are going to have a look at this with CPU single core running, and this is the value that we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at these values down here, and you can see that this one is changing. They kind of switch between the two quite a bit. We can have a look at temperatures as well, but the most important thing that we can grasp is that we are getting a single core going up to doing basically it's almost 4.1 gigahertz, and you can see them all slowly changing as it's doing one core, which is what we want. This is good. So we know a single core will boost up to beyond 4 gigahertz. That's cool, because that's what it should do. It should boost up, but it is only a single core. If we put the multiple core on, this will whiz round really quickly, but we've got 3.6 gigahertz here. You can see as it's whizzing round. So that stays fairly level, 3.6. That is absolutely fine. And we can even change this over here so that we can clear the min, max and average. Run it again, clear the min, max and average. So basically 3.6. So when you load all of the cores, every single one of the cores up with a bench like Cinebench, it will run at basically 3.7 gigahertz. If you run something immensely stressful, then you can actually, like OCCT or other, maybe even other rendering benchmarks, you know what I mean, you can get a dip. So it goes from 3.7 down to about 3.6. So you can lose somewhere between 100 and 200 megahertz on something immensely stressful. So strangely, back to OCCT is to talk about temperatures at stock. What we got for a maximum temperature, and OCCT is a really nice way of doing it, because we can set it to turn off at certain temps. We can also set times and how we want to put it, how much memory. So it's a really easy, nice way for us to test it. Now, when we did this, we were getting somewhere between 63 and 64 degrees, as you can see here, 63 degrees. And that is the fans are now pretty much running at about 1500 RPM. So their maximum speed is 1800 RPM, so they are spinning quite fast to keep it at those sort of temperatures. But you did see that there's only about 20 degrees difference between the idle and then the stock. So this is all pretty good. But like I said, the one thing that we do need to kind of stress is the current clock speed is 3.6 gigahertz, and it does actually say just in there on the bench, you can see it's 3.6. If I was to turn the benchmark off, you'll see it jump back up again. And there you go, you see it jumps up to 3.7. So if you do run something really, really stressful, it does have the ability to do that. But the most important thing that I did want to show you by doing this today is if you you may think that you're getting nearly 4.0, nearly 4.1 gigahertz with your XFR, because you've got 4 gigahertz boost and the XFR is taking us up that other 92 megahertz, and it does look like it's doing all of the cores, but only ever does them one at a time. You never get them all at once, and if you've got a lot of load on there, it won't be going up at all. It's only really single threaded stuff. So really the answer to getting your 4.1 boost all the time is actually overclocking. Okay, so this benchmark has only been running for 3 minutes nearly now, but our temperature is 78.5. If we let it run over 30 minutes, then it creeps up to about 82 degrees, but you can hear the fans running, and they are now running flat taps. So despite these now not reading properly, I think it's on this one, they are run 1890 RPM, so they're on flat taps now. So the system is trying to keep it cool. So it does get quite warm, it will go up into the 80s. Weird thing is though, is I'm actually using 1.4 volts. The load line calibration is it's all over not all over the place, but is boosting it up a little bit, despite it only being on the first level. But it's we've technically been able to put by using manual volts, we've been able to stop it spiking right up, which is what the system seems to want to do on its own, especially with the XFR. So technically now with this overclock, we're actually using less volts at times. But obviously when we were running OCCT before, it was reducing the volts, and it was down clocking a little bit, so it wasn't going to be pulling as much power, and it wasn't going to be getting as hot, which was why I think it managed to keep the temps in check. I don't know whether that's something AMD have built into it, so it does realise it's being put under a lot of stress, not necessarily by a testing tool like this, but it's just a way for it to, like I said, use less power, not create as much heat. But by going manual, we're obviously putting it under more stress. So 80 odd degrees. One of the reasons why it's a bit weird though is the fans are going absolutely crackers over there in the corner, blowing loads and loads out, and normally if I had a CPU that was at 80 degrees and these fans were like this, there would be absolute plumes of heat coming out of the top. And weirdly there's not. There doesn't seem to be a great deal of heat coming out. Now that then made me think, well, maybe my CPU's not right. So I asked AMD, and just to be clear, before you say, you know, your CPU's not doing this properly, or you've not mounted the cooler properly, or blah, 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 blah. I asked AMD, and I said 1.4 gigahertz, and I said 82 degrees to 85 degrees, depending on how long we run the benches and all that sort of stuff. And AMD did confirm those temperatures are about right. It's not excessively high. So they said that's where we would expect them to be. So, you know, above 80 is normal. Now you're thinking to yourself, 4 gigahertz, is that it? 4.1 was possible, but not with all of the benchmarks. It seemed to fall over about the 25-minute mark. It was kind of a bit hit and miss. A lot of the benches would pass. It was certainly fine for games, but we couldn't get it running with a very, very stressful test like this. It would eventually just black screen and then turn itself off. So we went back to 4 gigahertz. Now you'd think because of the XFR was running one of the cores at 4.1 that we would lose performance, but we've actually gained performance across the board. The overclock was always marginally better than the stock. In some way, in some of the benches, it was monumentally better. So one of the things that I can say is the XFR, in its nature, going above that 4 gigahertz mark up to 4.9, it doesn't really do anything. You're much better off having a decent, all of the cores at 4 gigahertz across the board, because when you think about it, what you've effectively done is you've not underclocked, well, you have underclocked a core, but you've effectively overclocked the other 7, and you're making sure that benchmarks, if they are multi-threaded, can use a full 4 gigahertz. And from what I'm hearing from talking to other media, and again SIs, I have heard that 4 gigahertz is good with decent volts, which is what we've gone for here. If we'd have put a lot more volts through, we may have got into the 4.1 gigahertz range, but temps would have been insane. Now what you also need to think about is we've got 79 degrees here at the moment. It's slowly working its way up, but we've got the fans on 100%. You could not live with this if this was your rendering rig. You can hear it in the background, it's going absolutely crackers. So I've gone with the 1.4 volts as like I said, we've overclocked the other 7 cores, and this is normal before you think something's gone wrong. We've overclocked the other 7 cores, and like I said, we've got a really nice boost. But what this does tell us is that if you do want to overclock these processors, 3.7 to up to 4 might not sound like a massive deal, but it's more the fact that you are going to need to have some properly good cooling, and we're going into kind of the conclusion stage now. But we've covered a lot about the XFR, the boost, the stock speed. Sometimes they can go down, and the fact that you do need to kind of get your hands on stuff to make sure they are all at 4, because as I've tried to explain, if it does say 4.1 very briefly, it's only 1 core. So we've covered all of this. It's now time for us to get on, because I have a lot of graphs for you. Okay, so first things first, if you are interested in the graphs, and I genuinely hope that you are, because you do need to go and see these, we have put so much extra time into making sure that we have the old 4, 6 and 8 cores in the graph for comparison, because I'm going to assume that a lot of you that are going to be watching this video are sat there with an AMD system wondering to yourself, should you be upgrading? Is it good? Is all the hype valid? Was it really worth it, or have they kind of overcooked it again? So we went to all that extra, and I'm going to show you what I can in these graphs. But we have a massive plethora of graphs on the website. So if you're interested in this product as a possible purchase, I would say to you, if you're genuinely thinking about spending £500 or $500 on the 1800X plus a board, we'll say that you're going to spend an average $200 or £200 on that. Then your memory, then a good cooler, because you're going to need one, as I've shown you. That's a big investment. So sitting through my waffling video and then going to have a look at some of my graphs, it's not going to take that long out of your life when you think to yourself how long it would take you to earn it. Unless you're Bill Gates, obviously. But anyway, power draw, because this was a big thing with AMD. It always has been. We've always kind of gone, it's hot, it uses too much power, it doesn't really do anything in the benches, it's like an i5, and I'm fed up with saying it. And I'm glad that these graphs are good. But power-wise, when I bring it up for you, yes, it does use a little bit more than you may have thought with the 6900K, but stock, it's just above a 6950X. Overclocked, it's about the same as a 6950X. So yes, the Intel would have been running slightly faster, and there's 10 cores in there rather than 8. But considering this is a brand new architecture, and whereas the 6950X was, the architecture had been around for ages and they had refined it, and they'd had a good more couple of years refinement going on with it, I can genuinely say that yes, it does use more power than the Intel 8 cores. But I'm not particularly worried about it. It's not a great deal. When we look at the numbers in the graph at stock, please remember that 199 watts is the entire system with this CPU running at max. So with the CPU under 100% load, the entire system was pulling 200 watts. When you overclock it, it went up 100 watts. It was a 50% boost. And then we ended up pulling 307 watts. So the actual amount of wattage it pulls when you add all those extra cores in, running at full chat, because we weren't running at 3.7, we were then asking them all to run at 4 gigahertz. I'm fine with that. I would genuinely say that's quite good. I'm not particularly happy with, as I've shown you, the temps. But, I would hope over time, maybe the next revision, it will get slightly better. It's a bit more than I was expecting, I will agree, or I will admit. And I would say that it's a bit more because the cooler was running at flat taps, and it's a dual 140mm fan, H110i GT, so it's pretty much one of the flagship Corsair coolers. and it was still hitting a solid 80 degrees even at 4 gigahertz. Now a lot of people are going to be going, oh, it's because you put 1.4 volts to. AMD is different. You can't, 1.4 volts on Intel, yes, it would have been hot. 1.4 volts with AMD is very different. This is actually below some of the recommended volts that I got suggested that you could put through. But rather than just going with a high volt, I actually sat there and worked my voltages backwards and found out that at 4 gigahertz, it was more than happy at 1.4 and I didn't need to put any more through. So I actually saved myself some time and some temperatures with that one. So I did put, a fair bit of effort into that. And it also brought the power draw down a little bit as well. So power draw, we are happy with. Temperatures, you're going to have to know that you're going to need a decent cooler. But the other thing to talk about with the temperatures is I was putting an immense amount of stress on the system to get it up to that point. All of those cores with 100% load, you're not going to get that level of load unless you are doing some really, really big renders. 3D rendering. A game is not going to make the system react like that, or at least none of the ones that we've got at the moment is going to make a system react like that. So you could, if you're a hardcore gamer and you do the odd bit of, here and there, rendering maybe Photoshop, you've not even got to particularly worry about it unless you've got 20 million layers going on. But Blender and stuff, there's those 4D modelers and stuff like that. Those of you are going to need to invest in good cooling. Gamers, you'll be able to tune your fans down a little bit more because your games aren't going to push it that high. You'll also probably be able to bring your fans down a little bit more at the desktop. So it's all about finding the balance for your use. I've obviously got to go with worst case scenario because I have to test how hot these things can get. But I hope that you'll realise I'm genuinely trying to find as many, nice ways to explain things to you so you don't think that playing Battlefield 1 is going to make your CPU hit 80 degrees. It won't unless you've set the system up in the BIOS or in your software ridiculously badly. And when it comes to temperatures, please remember, auto volts is not stock. Auto volts means I don't care, my motherboard can do whatever it likes. The only way that you can call yourself a man and a member of the PC master race, in my opinion, is you've at least got to have set your CPU core volts up properly because it's really not difficult. And I will be doing a Ryzen guide on it within the next couple of weeks. It's in my diary. And once I've got a couple of motherboard reviews out the way and the 1700X has been in and out as well, you will see it. I will be on it for you. Don't worry about it. So, next graph. Don't forget, you can go and have a look at these graphs on the OC3D website, and I will zoom in and out for you so you can see all of these. But PC Mark 8, we'll start here. It's a good all-rounder benchmark, and what we can see is the 1800X is faster than the 6900K at stock, and it's just behind the 6900K when it's overclocked. Now the 6900K would have been running, I can't remember because obviously I pushed them as hard as I can. I think it would have been running at about 4.4 gigahertz, so it had the clock speed advantage on this one with the overclock. But then the only ones above it, you got the 6950X, which would have done better because there's more cores, and you got the 7600 and 7700K because they would have been running at 5 gigahertz. So when you put all that into kind of the match, in the graphs, and you look at that, I'm again really happy. Yes, it's not topped it, but with a 4 gigahertz overclock, it never, ever would have done with this benchmark. So the fact that it's done so closely to the 6900K overclock there, and it was 400 megahertz behind, is epic. 3D Mark, it turns out 3D Mark absolutely loves Ryzen. Who knew it? And by loves Ryzen, I mean, let's have a look at 1800X at the top. It's above the 6950X, it's above the 6900K. Now, I do need to stress with this, one of the things you do need to realise is I have not retested all of those results in this graph. Some of them we have because we've had to because they're new, but we can't retest that whole lot. So the Ryzen has been tested on new NVIDIA drivers because you may have seen that I've got a 980 in the system. And I'm sure there are people out there right now that are going, oh yeah, NVIDIA paid. I genuinely wish they did. It would make my life easier. They don't. The 980 is in there because we've used the 980 for such a long time, and all of the tests that you're going to see today will have been done on a 980, so everything is directly comparable. I cannot just swap the graphics cards out without totally changing the graph. So the fact that it's been in there for so long is good, and we've not really, I didn't get to keep like a Fury X or anything in the past for my testing. That's the only one that I've got to keep, which is the 480, which is why it's on the shelf. Oh yeah, have you seen the shelf? That's changed, by the way, in case you're wondering. Go back, you'll see, yes. Yeah, so yes, the 980 is in there, but the drivers have obviously changed because each time we do a review, we update the drivers to make sure that we've got best compatibility. So you could say that it's gone above because it's, you know, had a bit of driver help. I don't really care with this one. It is at the top. Do you know what I mean? Do I really want to go back and retest the 6950X? No, not on this one. It doesn't matter. It's going to be there or thereabouts anyway. So, Cinebench. Now this was one that AMD have been shouting about loudly. So this was one that I did pay a lot of attention to. So Cinebench here, you've got, if you look at the I mean, we can go at the bottom, by the way, you can see the 860K, which we tested. This was done specifically for this review. You've got the FX6 that's in there. That was, again, we've totally retested that. But when we go back up to the interesting stuff, 6900K, the Ryzen is above the 6900K. It didn't do so well with the OpenCL stuff, but when it came down to pure CPU grunt, it did beat the 6900K. And with the overclock applied, it was actually, again, just a bit behind the 6900K, which I'm going to put down to core speed again. But when you've got them, you know, stock for stock, although they wouldn't have been quite running at the same speed, stock for stock, it's absolutely plumb dead there. You know, well, just in front of this, the 6900K. It's the same story with Cinebench R15 as well. Now, when we move on to this is a test that we've never bothered doing in the past, but there's been a lot of shout about single-threaded performance. So what we did is everything in this graph we've retested. And I mean everything. So the 6900K, the 6850K. We didn't bother doing the 6950X because where would we end up stopping? So with this test, single threaded, these are all at stock as they would have come out of the box. And then what you can see here is the 1800X is just behind the 6900K in single threaded performance. Add the overclock in and it does go a little bit in front. We didn't overclock many of the other ones. We did some of the AMD, like the older ones and stuff. But anyway, so the Intels that are above, I'm going to say that the Intels that are above there, like the 7700K, you need to realise that when you apply, when it would have been running, that single thread would have been running at 4.5 gigahertz. So it's going to have a big lead. So these kind of numbers do kind of work out because, like I said, single threaded, single core. Onto the R15, same kind of thing here. The only thing with R15 and single threaded performance is we did notice that the 6900K was marginally in front. We didn't get a massive boost out of the overclock with this one. So with this one, but the most important thing to show with this graph is the single core here for the Ryzen 1800X would have obviously been able to have flicked up to that above 4 gigahertz and gone into almost 4.1. But we did notice that it didn't stay at 4.1 continuously. It did keep dropping and then coming back up again. So even though our overclock on that single core is less, because it stayed a constant 4 gigahertz, we did actually get more performance. So that is actually a very good indicator for setting your own manual overclock at home, because where the performance will be more consistent and won't drop and, you know, dance all over the place, you can see that you can actually get more performance out of it as well. So that is a really, really interesting result. So yes, I have waffled a lot, but I'm genuinely enthused about this and I've been very excited about it for a long time, because people see, as a reviewer, your life gets harder as you get more successful, because people sit up and they take notice. People send you stuff. Yes, I get graphics cards from NVIDIA. I get graphics cards from AMD as well. Sometimes I might not get to keep them, but they get reviewed all the same way. Yes, Intel do send me processors, but they don't pay me any money. I wish they did. They've got lots of it. I would like some of it. Do you know what I mean? I'm a businessman. This is my job. But it doesn't affect how I do my job. It doesn't. It's just not the way I work. I've had many arguments with manufacturers in the past, and I still do to this day when things aren't right. So let's get the arguments out of the way with Ryzen. Temperatures. It's not that great. They're warm. You're going to need a killer cooler. I don't understand how you need such a massive cooler, yet it doesn't seem to then get exhausted into the air. So something with the CPU is not quite right. Whether the IHS isn't on there, we could be talking about D-lids. I don't know. We've done as much as we can do. We know our temperatures aren't off. And we've got a massive cooler on it. We've done as much as we could have done for it, short of putting a massive water cooling loop on it. You may have dropped 5 degrees or something. I would genuinely say if you're going to overclock one of these and you want to live with it and you want a quiet life, you would need water cooling. So that's about it. Memory, a lot of people, and to be honest with you, I don't know whether it's going to be people that don't, oh, my friend's got 3200, I must have 3200. If your friend's got 3200, he's obviously running an Intel platform, and you can't really compare them because it's totally new. This is new, it's a blank sheet. You're not going to win any memory awards with this kit. If you go and have a look on the OC3D website, you'll see the bandwidth is fairly good. It's all right, it's the middle of the pack, but you're not going to win any memory awards, especially not for speed. But there's a plus point to that, because if if you're going to be lucky enough to get like maybe 2933 megahertz, that does mean that you don't have to feel like you have to spend loads of money on memory, because if you can't get 32 or 3600 megahertz running without worrying and manual volts and all that type of stuff, don't worry about it then. Buy 2666, buy a 3000 megahertz kit and run it at 2933. Save some money, put it into your graphics card, or more importantly, put it into the money that you're going to need for your cooling. So with the memory, I'm not overly fussed. Yes, it's behind, but you've seen the benchmarks. It's obviously not made a massive difference with this. It's made less of a difference with this than it would have done if I'd have done the same thing with Intel. So there's another big one for it. If I'd have done the same sort of thing with Intel, it would have made a bigger performance drop. Doesn't seem to have done with this. So again, I'm not particularly that fussed about it. When we look at performance though, I love the performance, because I was really worried about AMD going on and on and on about the 6900K tie-in. And with the 6900K tie-in, it was like, have they bitten off more they can chew? Is it because of this? Are they showing that benchmark because they know it's going to be better in that benchmark? Because there was like, they kept showing Blender, and Blender loves AMD. It's always been that way. Intel's always been behind, and I was like, oh no, they're just going to overhype it. Well, they haven't, because it's been through my test suite, which people would say massively favours Intel. And they would say because I've got 20 other Intel processors in the graphs, oh, he's obviously biased. It's done amazingly. It's done so well. It's genuinely put a big smile on my face, because I'll be 100% honest. I was worried it wasn't going to be good, and if I'd told the truth and come here and said it's not that good, the trolls will have gone out of their bridges in like riot formation, and they would have been stood outside of TTL towers shouting, shill or whatever, because I seem to get that a lot. And it's really nice that I can sit here with a smile on my face after picking like no end and arguing with AMD about motherboards and arguing about this and just going about my own thing, and it's done epically. It's a barnstormer. Do you want to know why it's such a barnstormer? Intel have just dropped the prices on the 6900K, and I looked on Overclockers before I recorded this video, and the price for the 6900K was £979. That's a lot of money. Do you want to know how much the 1800X is? £499. It's half the price, and yet the performance is absolutely bob on and spot on. So I absolutely love it. So the only marginal thing really was the games. And the thing with the games is we have to pick a few games. We don't do a full game suite because it's a CPU, and CPUs don't play a huge role in those really. So as I've shown you, there's certain CPUs. There's certain CPUs that love certain games. Now normally it's going to come down to clock speed, because that's just the way that games work. So for a 4 gigahertz processor to have done as well as it's done, I'm genuinely not particularly fussed about it. If you want if you've got a CPU bound game, then add in, at this present moment in time, most games are not going to thrive on 8 cores. But then there is a big but. Yes, games aren't really going to be core bound, because like I said, there's a few of them that are, don't get me wrong, there are a few of them that are, but they are rare. Most of them don't really care. Most of them like clock speed. But, and like I said, there is a big but, streaming is becoming incredibly popular. Loads of people want to get on to streaming now. I mean, I've got friends out there that have gone from, kind of normal jobs and have started streaming for a living. Look at Valkyria on Twitch. Mark Purdy, absolutely lovely nipper. He used to work overclockers. He's now gone into Twitch streaming. Does it for a living now as well. Good on him. Check him out. Reason why I'm saying it is because this would be a processor for Valkyria, because you've got all of those extra cores kind of sat there in the background, and they can be taking this, because they're not really getting stressed out. They're just going to yomp on with that Twitch streaming, and you're not going to have to worry about it. Some people out there that run separate systems to cope with their Twitch streaming. Probably not going to have to worry about it with this one. I'd actually genuinely say to Purdy, if he wants one of these, I'll sort him out and he can let me know about it. But it's having those extra cores there means that if you are doing stuff like Twitch streaming, you've got loads of extra cores that are just, it's not going to affect your game performance so much. Don't forget, sometimes it can make a bit of a GPU difference. So it's not a golden fast rule, but you get what I'm trying to say. And then also if you're transcoding for films and stuff, loads of extra cores there. There's reasons why you would want to go that way. And when you are doing things like transcoding and video rendering and all that sort of stuff, cores, 9 times out of 10, depending on the codec that you use, are more important than clock speed anyway, unless you're using something like WMV, which most of us are moving away from. So there's lots of pluses and minuses. There aren't actually that many minuses, much less than I expected. So really the only negatives that we've got are high temperatures, so you are going to need a good cooler. And if your mate's telling you that you can't buy Ryzen because you can't run 3600 megahertz or 3200 megahertz is a little bit difficult for you to run, and that's not good enough for you to buy Ryzen. If you're not going to buy Ryzen because you can't run 3200 megahertz RAM, then to be honest with you, I would be a bit shocked, because it's not going to make that big a difference. I actually stopped myself from an insult there. That's personal growth for me. So, what award would I give it? Do you want to know what award I'm going to give it? The Enthusiast Award. And it's not worthy of Ultimate, because it's not. It's not the ultimate processor. Why is it enthusiast? Because it genuinely is enthusiastic. It's brought out the enthusiast in me. If anything's to go by the viewings that I've got on the videos, there's so much hype and people wanting to do this well. People wanting to do it well. Yeah, it's late. I've not had a lot of sleep in the last couple of days because I didn't mention that I've had to do all of this work in 2 days. So yes. It has done incredibly well. Yes, we have started off with the absolute best one, so it's only kind of the 1700X is going to be a bit less because of core speeds and less, and we're going to be working backwards. But I don't particularly care because this is the most expensive one. But it's the most expensive one, and yet it's still half the price of the closest comparable Intel one as far as like specs are concerned, and it performs pretty much the same as well. So when you put all that into a big bowl of goodness, it's going to bake a hell of a cake. So I'm just going to leave you with that, and you can let me know what you think underneath. I genuinely really like this now. It's going to be really exciting now to see the boards that come out. One of the things I will say is people are going to want to know if you should upgrade. If you're on 2011, I'm going to say you probably shouldn't bother. If you're on anything with an AMD board in it, you should, and have a valid reason to upgrade. You might not want the fully fledged one, but you know, we're going to be covering the ones anyway. But if the 1700X, if it's what we think it's going to be, which is lower clock speeds, then it's still going to be a night and day difference from what you've got at the moment. If you've got a 7700K, then if you want to kind of jump ships and go over, the only reason why you're going to be wanting to jump ships and go over is because you're just fed up with the same thing being regurgitated over and over again in different chipsets. We know that the AM4 socket is going to support all of the new AM4 CPUs, right from the APUs at the bottom up to the 1800X at the top. So we're going to get 2 cores with graphics on it. We're going to get 4 cores, we're going to get 6 cores, and we're going to get the 8 cores. So if you've not got the money to go for the 8 core at first, why don't you just get a quad when they come out and then upgrade later when someone upgrades one on eBay? That is the great thing. Sorry about that, battery change, I spoke for too long. So the long short of it, we were talking about like kind of upgrades and stuff. If you want to come over from Intel, then you're going to kind of need to want to. But if you're on one of the older ones, something below Z170, maybe you're stuck on Sandy or something like that, and you've just been seeing everyone doing these little side steps. So Z97 and beyond, and older. If you're thinking about this as a viable upgrade platform, I would say 100% yes. I'm really now interested. We've seen the 8 core, and I know I've got the other 8 cores coming, the 1700X and the 1700. I'm now really interested now, because the big one for me is going to be the 6 core, and to see how well that both performs, but also price comparison, because I think we're going to be assuming that that 6 core is going to be some serious competition for the lower end Intel processor. So that's something else that I'm now really interested in, and really looking forward to bringing you more information about it as well. So if you've sat through all of this, which I know not very many of you have been, congratulations, thank you for staying tuned. How many of you did notice that changed halfway through? That's going to be a new thing. You're going to want to keep an eye on that in the not too distant future. You can see me wooden box, and you know, we changed the background for the video this time. So thank you for sitting through this. I don't say this very often, but if you've found this video and you've made it this far, you must have not got bored with me waffling on. So thank you. But if you like the video, hit the subscribe button, because there are going to be a lot more videos like this. I've got so much planned for Ryzen, it's ridiculous. And I'm going to hopefully try and make your life easier, because I'm going to give you guides on how to set stuff up, how to go about getting the best performance, how to go about setting things up properly, so you can either have it rich, you know, like blowing doors off and being as quick as you can possibly get it, or possibly making things cool and quiet so that you can get the best kind of performance without your missus giving you nuts that your fans are always spinning really hard. So I'm going to be looking to find as many ways as possible that you can bring you valid performance as well. But obviously, I'm a reviewer. So unlike some other sites that are going to give you a CPU review and 1 or 2 other motherboard reviews, I do things differently. So I'm going to be trying to cover as many boards as I can as well. So I've got a lot of stuff on the books at the moment to come from MSI and from Gigabyte, as well as Asus. So you can stay tuned for those as well. Though I will be getting out as quick as I possibly can do. But for now at least, this is Tiny Tom Logan with a huge grin on his face, because he hasn't mentioned that I should have done ages and ages ago that we've given it the Enthusiast Award, because I genuinely think AMD are back with this one. I was hoping for i5, for it to be comparable with i5 and to give us something decent to go around the i5 kind of territory, but they've come in with an i7 2011 barnstorming one. So I genuinely think we've got some really interesting times ahead, and I'm very interested to see how the lower end models do as well. But for now at least, I do need to say this, thank you to AMD for sending it to me, because they didn't have to. Do you know what I mean? And I have been a pain. I always am, because I never do things the simple way, as you know, because I'm making long videos and stuff. But thank you, and thank you for watching. I've really, really enjoyed this one.